Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Sportsbook Confidential. My name is John Sullivan, and I'm coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in Seneca Falls, New York. And this little show here is to help you learn and grow as a sports bettor. And as we learn and grow as a sports bettor, we also learn and grow as a show. So if there are any technical difficulties today, please bear with us. But we have our first ever guest/co-host on the show, and I want to welcome our co-host right now. Here he is, Mr. Brian Mayer. Brian, how are you? What is going on?
Good to see you, Scoob. By the way, yes, I do call you Scoob or Scooby because we share a love of the Mystery Machine.
Yes, Scooby is an acceptable nomenclature at this point, so no big deal. But glad to have you with us. Glad to have somebody to discuss all these wonderful sports betting topics. And as we go ahead, before we go ahead with all the content of today's show, tell me a little bit about what you like, know, are interested in, have learned as a sports bettor or want to learn, or as a fantasy player. Any of that you might want to share with our tens of people in the audience?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The expertise that I bring to the table is basically nil. I am very much a casual bettor, but just being a sports fan in general, I think it's good to have a base of knowledge to work from. Most of my knowledge obviously comes through you. We have a history of exploring the daily fantasy sports world, and we certainly had a good amount of success early on. And so I generally will look for trends that will happen in gambling for small amounts through over-unders and through totals. If a spread sticks out to me one way or the other, I will definitely want to jump on it. But I certainly will be part of the audience looking forward to seeing what else you have to share as far as what you offer people on a weekly basis.
Okay. Well, there's one area where I think you excel and I do not, and that is in the golf realm. You are an avid golfer, and I am a feeble-shouldered human being, so I don't swing a golf club anymore, but even when I did, I wasn't very good at it. And by the way, the Finger Lakes One does have a very interesting golf podcast called Golf J. I've checked it out a couple of times, but so when the new golf season starts, I hope you will give us your input on. Do you watch a lot of golf on the telly, so to speak?
I do, certainly. The majors are must-watch television, and down here in Austin, good mornings. We have a couple of major tournaments that are coming, at least tour-style events coming through, and there's definitely a lot of headway to be made in the golf world, and that's another excellent format that Daily Fantasy has really jumped on, is picking a small group of golfers versus the field. So, yeah, totally. Bring it on.
All right. So we're going to, as we transition here, we're kind of in between seasons here. The regular season for college football has ended, and there's some of the smaller bowl games going on, and NFL is still in full swing, and we're going to transition to college hoops. So we're going to talk about college hoops today and just get our toe in the pool, so to speak, before we get down to the nitty-gritty of actually betting on games. But as we start with the show here, we always do, we going to update my bankroll based on my picks from last week. And as you can see, I had a little bit of a downward trend My bankroll last week started at $696, and going through the picks real quick, I will for you. We had the Ducks on Friday that lost. That was minus $23. We had a push on the Army-Navy game. It was kind of a miracle push because they were down by 17, and they ended up down by 7, so no change there. I had the Rams minus 3, that they refused to run the ball. It was very disappointing in that game against the Bears, minus 23. The Lions over, and those two teams mailed it in, and that lost, and another minus 23. And then the Cowboys and the Eagles went to overtime, so that helped our over, plus $22. And if you do the math there, the new bankroll is $649. And as we divide by 30, as we always do, our new bet size this week going forward is $22. So let me ask you, Brian, do you think you might make a pick today?
It's possible.
Okay, you can see, we're going to talk about it and see what we got out there. So before we get to the games that we will consider this weekend to bet on, let's talk a little bit about college hoops. And have you, in the last few years, have you followed college hoops a lot?
I generally don't get into it until it's closer to tournament time. But top 25 is always going to be in that forefront, especially once football season wraps up.
So down there in Austin, you've got Shaka Smart at a UT there. Their team is kind of considered to be, in my opinion anyway, they're really under the radar this year, but he always seems to come up with a competitive squad, especially in the Big 12 is a really good, I think, offensive conference. A lot of high-scoring games, but he's known for transition and defense, and be interesting to see where that comes in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up on the screen our college basketball futures, and obviously there are about 350 Division I basketball teams, and we can't put a lineup for every single team on the list. So we're going to talk about who's on the list, and we're going to talk about who's not on the list. And as you can see, we've got at the very top Duke and Gonzaga, who Gonzaga has already beaten Duke once this year. And Duke has a player named Zion Williamson, who is considered to be NBA ready right now, but as you know, you can't go straight from high school to the pros anymore. You have to take a year. So he decided to go to Duke, and they seemed unbeatable at the beginning of the year, but I have a feeling that teams may find a way to beat Duke. But Duke always seems to get a really beautiful path to the Final Four whenever the tournament seeds come out. They always seem to get that, that all of it, that how many tough teams are they going to have to play on their way to the Final Four. So we'll see. And then, of course, I spelled Kansas wrong there, but Kansas is 10-1, and they're currently ranked number 1.
I love Kansas.
Virginia is 12-1. And Nevada is 14-1. Now, Nevada is everybody's Cinderella, although they're not really a Cinderella. They have a lot of upperclassmen returning, and they have a pretty cakewalk to through the Mountain West Conference to the to an automatic bid, and they're considered a top 10 team already. Then you start to get into the big schools that everybody that are not going to be dominant, or in my opinion, Michigan I think is dominant. Kentucky, North Carolina, and Michigan are all 16-1. Tennessee, who's currently ranked number 3, is 20-1. Villanova, who I think is barely in the top 25 because they've had a couple of early losses, is 25-1. Auburn and Michigan State at 33-1. Arizona State, coached by Bobby Hurley, and I spelled that wrong as well. My spelling is very off today. 40-1. And then you have Oregon, Syracuse, Wichita State, Wisconsin, all 50-1, and Texas at 80-1. Hook 'em horns, and and there's a few teams that are not on that list that really kind of catch my eye. So, looking at that list, Brian, why don't you tell me do you want me to leave the list up for you? Why don't you tell me who you think is a good value? Now, remember, as a value bet, you're looking for something that is, you think that the team is underappreciated based on the odds.
Yeah, I think perennial power Michigan State certainly sticks out in that vein, and maybe even a dark horse like Wisconsin, who's usually a low-scoring team but has quite a bit of offensive firepower this year, would be something to consider as well. Syracuse is having a down year. Your boy Boeheim had a little tiff with LeBron about his prize recruit earlier this year. So I think they might have a hard time come tournament time, although they usually do kind of make some surprise moves in the first two rounds. But and then obviously Nevada coming out of nowhere is also a team that is a very big surprise, being in the top 10 at this point. Yeah, maybe even those Vols can get a little a little value there.
The SEC is really underappreciated as a conference, in my opinion. Compare obviously the ACC, the Big Ten, even the Pac-12. Oregon. Manute Bol's son plays for Oregon, Bol, and they already beat Syracuse this year at the Madison Square Garden there. So. Villanova at 25-1, I think, is a value, and for me, the one that sticks out the most is Michigan at 16-1. John Beilein. How many championship games has Michigan been in? They've been in at least two with him as the coach, all the way to the final game. So I feel like even if that drops a little bit, because Michigan's still undefeated this year. They won't go undefeated for the season, but if that dropped to 20 or 25-1, I think I'd be all over that. Looking at, I'm going to put you back up on the screen here for a second. Looking at that list, there were some teams that were not on there that I really like, and one of them is our top 20 ranked University at Buffalo Bulls.
Sure enough, the highest-ranked MAC team in over 40 years. Nobody saw that coming. Both UB football and basketball have overachieved this year, and that's been really fun to see. So if you want to take a flyer on a longer shot, that might be a good way to go as well.
UB's at 100-1 right now, and the thing is, it's been a long time since a MAC team got an at-large bid to the tournament, and I think UB being in the top 20 means that if for some reason they do not win the MAC tournament, that they would probably get an at-large this year. So because they have played a tough pre-conference schedule. A couple other teams that are 100-1 that are not that we didn't make on that list: University of Arizona, the Butler Bulldogs, and the University of Washington, whose head coach Mike Hopkins is a Syracuse former assistant at Syracuse and employs that nasty 2-3 zone. So those are all 100-1. There's three other teams that were not even on the list that we're not offering odds on publicly, which means you could go into a sports book and you could get odds on them. The first one that came to mind is Houston, who are undefeated, and they're in that weird AAC conference with UConn and a couple other schools. And then Furman, I think, is I don't think they're going to win a national championship, but I think they're a Cinderella team, and I think that they could win a NCAA tournament game or two. They're out of the Southern Conference. And, of course, I said them already, but UConn, a team that's already beat Syracuse, a team that has Danny Hurley as their head coach, formerly from University of Rhode Island, that is he played his college ball at Seton Hall. He's been a proven winner, year in and year out for the last 10, 15 years. I feel like that team. That's one of those teams that they get this. They've got a recruit that supposedly could be eligible in January. I can't pronounce his name. His last name Akok, but he's at a prep school and he's supposed to be able to be eligible in January. If he comes on board, that could change their futures, and it might be a really sneaky championship pick to grab UConn, maybe at 250 to 1 or something like that. So I think that if I had a free bet to spend at the sportsbook, I would, picking just one team, I think I would have to pick Michigan. Any last thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think if you're looking at that little grouping of 16-1 teams, usually Kentucky maybe having a down year by their standards. It's surprising to see in that group, but for whatever reason, and whether it be the Big Ten or whatever, Michigan seems to be constantly overlooked. And we remember John Beilein from his Canisius days. How much of a solid coach he is, and yeah, totally.
All right. So yep. So if you're looking to place a college basketball future, I think now's the time to do it. You want to get those juicy odds before everybody really finds out the nitty-gritty on these teams when they play in their conference schedules. So that's going to do it for the college hoops, and we're going to move on to Friday on Frozen Pond with the NHL. And let's start off. We've got the Vegas Golden Knights at New Jersey Devils. Vegas is on the second leg of their road trip. They have been playing well. The Devils have kind of fallen apart. Their goaltending has really taken a beating. Do like Vegas here, but I just don't feel like this game offers any juicy odds for me. Brian, if you see anything that catches your eye, you go ahead and jump on in, okay?
Alrighty then. He's not the best colored man in the league for nothing, folks.
So I can spill my coffee on myself. Bruins at Penguins. Why don't you so you've got the Penguins coming off a horrible loss to the Blackhawks on Wednesday. They were on the road in Chicago, and then the Bruins had a bad loss earlier in the week, but they're slowly starting to get healthy. And Tuukka's back and playing pretty well. So I do like the value in the Bruins here, but I'm not sure I really, that of all the games on the board, I don't really feel like that's the one for me. And then you have our wonderful Coyotes at the New York Rangers tonight. Coyotes just lost to the Sabres last night, and they didn't have somebody was out. Galenchuk was out, I think, last night.
Yeah, Galchenyuk did not play.
Galchenyuk, yeah, like I can pronounce the Russian names. But so you wonder if he's going to be in tonight, and they'll have their young hot goalie playing tonight as opposed to Dubnyk, who Kemper played last night. That's who played last night. So I forget what the new kid's name is, but he's been pretty good for them. And the Rangers are kind of mailing it in right now. They've made it known that their team is for sale. Everybody's available except for probably Henrik. So, and then you have the Senators at the Red Wings. This is who really cares about this game kind of thing, and I mean that not only from a betting perspective, but also from a which team really wants to win this game. 140 for a somewhat evenly matched teams is actually really good value if you can hold your nose and bet on the Senators. And then you have the Capitals at the Hurricanes, and the Caps have been really, really good to me this year. They just have so much firepower. Even Tom Wilson has been kind of a goofball for them, but they have so much skill. Their top 6 skaters are just loaded. And the Hurricanes have kind of come back to earth. They started out really hot, and they've got a lot of young guys that, a lot of skill but not a lot of size. Dougie Hamilton, for example, Sebastian Aho. These guys they're not like, there's not a lot of size on that team. And their goaltending has really, really been average. So I like the Capitals, and that may be where I end up today. Avalanche at the Blues. And the Blues have been super inconsistent all year. And I just read an article yesterday that said they have some discord within the locker room. And maybe maybe they shouldn't have traded for Ryan O'Reilly. Well, I have to admit that Ryan O'Reilly has actually played pretty well on the ice, but it seems like that team is not gelling at all, and there's some discontent in that locker room. And I think you're going to make more money in the long run betting against the Blues than betting on them.
Well, hopefully he's not crashing his truck through the Tim Hortons locker room.
Do they even have Tim Hortons in St. Louis? I don't know. But yeah. Well, if they're, you can get it at Target. So, so you've got the Jets minus 135 on the road at the Blackhawks, coming off a big win. The Blackhawks beat the Penguins 6-3 the other night, 6-4 maybe. I've been betting the Blackhawks a lot early in the year. I'm like, they can't be that bad. They can't be that bad. They can't be that bad. But now I'm starting to think they are. They just seem to have trouble scoring goals. If the other team gets 3 goals, it doesn't seem like the Blackhawks have an answer. The Jets played last night. They had a 5-4 overtime win over the Oilers, and I don't know. That game just makes me want to. I think that's supposed to be minus 150 and plus 135. I think I put the odds in there wrong. Anyway, and the last game is the Flyers at the Oilers, the McJesuses. The Flyers, I don't know if they bring Gritty on the road or not, but
they should.
They should, yeah. He'd be a fan favorite. But they do seem to be they did find a goaltender. They called somebody up, and they've got Neuwirth back. So it seems like their goaltending issues are slowly getting resolved. So I do kind of like, I think the Flyers are going to get better as the year goes on, and the Oilers played last night and blew a big lead. Could be a letdown game for them. The Oilers are, since they brought Ken Hitchcock in, have played really well, and they play kind of a defense first. They get really out. They go out and they play really chippy, and if they get a lead, they kind of they really. If they get behind, then they go to that fire wagon style of hockey where they, just pinch and go all out and jump the rush and all that stuff. And it's an interesting team to watch because he's trying to change the philosophy, and he's done a lot of good things, but I don't know if he's the ultimate solution for them. But maybe he can get them in the playoffs. I don't know. Anything on that list stand out to you? Do you want me to keep it up there for you?
Yeah, it's really surprising to see how far the Blackhawks have fallen this year, but it was bound to happen sooner or later with their aging core, I guess. But a few of those key pieces like Panarin, they're really missing at this point. But you just never know with back-to-back games. But I agree that the Caps are certainly. They're looking as strong as they could at this point, and maybe you can get some value with the old Coyotes.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. If they get Galchenyuk back today, and they've got their young stud goaltending tonight, so I feel like that game at 1 plus 150 is real good value. So I don't know if. Exactly where I'm going to, the Caps really stand out to me right now, but we'll see where I end up at the end of the show. So that's Friday night. We talked about talking about Saturday's games, and for those of you that don't bet on hockey much, or because Saturday is usually the biggest night of the week for the NHL schedule. They don't have the odds up for most of the Saturday games at this point, so it's really hard for us to talk about which teams. We could talk about a matchup that we would be interested in watching, but from a betting perspective, it's really tough to do. So let's move on to the NFL. I'm going to put you up on the screen here, Brian, for a second. And any thoughts on the NFL season so far? What do you think about? The Texans? No. What, you showing off your horse picture there, Kimosabi?
Yeah, I figured I'd just frame it for you. This is in Austin. It's mostly cowboy country, but the Texans grab their share of the attention, and with that undeniable 9-game winning streak, I was actually there to see toward the beginning of it. The Bills gave the Texans one of their stronger wins early on with the Peterman special pick six. And since then, they've certainly come together, obviously benefiting from being in that terrible division that they're in. But Deshaun Watson and Nuke Hopkins have just, really kind of cemented themselves being elite players. You'd still like to see some more consistency from Deshaun Watson if they're going to do anything besides get bounced in the first round. But if their defense keeps improving, you certainly have to look out for them. And of course, the Cowboys, they look like they were just going to fall right off the face of the earth again and get Jason Garrett fired to Jera's disappointment. But now they've turned things around and taken hold of another mediocre division in the NFC East, and it's hard to see if the Eagles are able to give them any sort of a challenge. They're going to probably have to run the table to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, so, it's interesting you talked about the Texans, and they really impressed me how well Deshaun Watson came back from that injury, and how well their offense continued with when Will Fuller went out for the season. They've got the two running backs that kind of share the load, and that team has really, from a betting perspective, has done well for me. And as a matter of fact, we're going to lead off talking about them with the two Saturday games in the NFL this weekend. Texans at the New York Jets. They have betting on the Texans over has done really well for me, and the over tomorrow is 41.5, and that game is supposed to be in very 40s, maybe 50 even in New York's in the Meadowlands, we'll say. So Jets getting 7. You got their coach who's probably playing for his job, and you wonder what they're going to bring to the table. But I don't like the spread in that game, but I really do like the over. If you have thoughts on any particular game, Brian, just jump in, okay?
You betcha. Okay.
And then the later game on Saturday is the Browns at the Broncos, minus 2.5 at home for the Broncos. 45.5 is the total. I don't know what I think about the total here because Denver's a tough place to play. And I feel like this is going to be it's going to be right there. It's going to be like a 24-20 type of game. I do like the Broncos minus 2.5. I think everybody's overvaluing the Browns right now after their win last week against the Panthers. And the Broncos need this for a playoff spot. So this is kind of a must-win game for them.
I agree. It's much too early to try to trust the Browns to do anything just yet.
Yeah. So I really like both of these games to wager this weekend. So I may end up on both of those. So let's go on to the Sunday games. And I put everything on the list here today because we don't have any college football to talk about. So some of these I may talk about a lot more than others. Titans at the Giants. Giants minus 2.5-point favorites. Odell Beckham mysteriously did not play last week. It's kind of short notice. 43.5 is the total. I assume OBJ plays this week, and Titans need this game for their playoff chances. And their last game was that big victory. I think it was Thursday night when Derrick Henry ran for like a gazillion yards. And you have to feel like that they're going to, as a team that's fighting for a playoff spot, in those situations, they're going, no matter how bad the game is, they're not saving for next week. They're going to try to extend the game. They're going to try to, put as many points on the board as possible. So I like the over here, but I'm not sure on the total. I feel like the Titans can win this game because the Giants really don't have anything to play for, although they've been playing much better the last couple of weeks. So moving on to the Packers and the Bears, and Aaron Rodgers is unleashed. Mike McCarthy was fired as the coach of the Packers, and they came out and put a whooping on the Falcons then the very next week. And I think actually, I did not watch that whole game, but I believe Aaron Rodgers sat the fourth quarter in that game because they were up like 34-6 or something like that. And yeah, so they get the Bears. Packers are still mathematically alive for the playoffs. They could finish 8-7-1, and they would need help, but they could still get a wild card. The Bears basically just need one win in their last couple of games to clinch a playoff spot. I don't believe they've clinched yet. But 6 points is a lot. I feel like even if the Bears were up by 13 late, that Aaron Rodgers could get a touchdown. Again, another situation where it's do or die for the Packers. They have to win if they want to get in the playoffs. So, the total there is 45. I feel like that would go over, assuming there is no crazy weather in Chicago. It seems like that the weather's going to be pretty calm for most of the nation on Sunday. So, but yeah, I would lean towards Packers +6 there. Moving on to the Lions at the Bills, and -2, and the over/under 39. What do you think, Brian? You watch most Bills games. What do you think about this one? I'm gonna put you on here.
Well, once again, we don't have to have that in the hunt conversation in December again, because that just gets annoying. The Lions are another perennial disappointment, and it should on paper be one of those games that both teams would be somewhat evenly matched. So the Bills performing at home, you just unfortunately never know what you're going to get, and that goes with the weather, that goes with their quarterbacking. At least their defense has been, fairly consistent throughout the year. Not that great against the run, but
actually the number one ranked defense in the NFL right now.
And okay, never mind
then. No, you're right. I mean, they're not number one ranked in every overall. They're ranked number one, but they usually do passing, rushing, and scoring. Those are the three different rankings they do. But it's. I think it'll be. I'm gonna put the graphic back up here. I think it'll be somewhat competitive. You got Matt Patricia, who was with the Patriots for so long, coming to Buffalo, and he knows what he's in for there. But you have a Lions team that's kind of, at least on the offensive side, that really is just struggling. I don't know, if it was a pick'em game, I think I would take the Bills, but you just don't know what you're going to get with. I don't even want to touch that total of 39. So, all right, let's get through some of these other ones real quick. Bucks at the Ravens. Joe Flacco is healthy, but he is not going to start. He's lost his starting job to Lamar Jackson. Pretty much Ravens still have playoff hopes. I think they're still a wild card currently. 46.5 is the total. You have to like the over there. I feel like the Bucs score a lot of points, give up a lot of points. Jameis Winston is really kind of playing for his job. I feel like that they may cut ties with him if he doesn't finish out the year somewhat strong. You've always got Fitzmagic on the bench, but this game is important for the Ravens. 7.5 is a lot of points. I think I would stay away from the total and maybe take the Bucs plus 7.5. It really depends on the turnover battle.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the Ravens have become a run-first team with Lamar Jackson at the helm. I think they've run like almost 2/3 of their plays have been RPOs and whatnot. So even despite that, they're still maintaining somewhat of the same offensive output that they had. In general, it's probably going to be not the biggest defensive battle.
Yeah. These games will be watchable. You remember last year the Bills making the playoffs. We ended up watching the Ravens game because we needed that loss for the Bills to get in. But these games only become watchable for playoff implications at this point, which is why the Cardinals at the Falcons will probably not be talked about very much. Cardinals completely mailed it in last week. I was very disappointed because I picked the over in that game. They only scored 3 points. I just can't. There's nothing about that game that even interests me to talk about here. Not the spread, not the total. I suppose if you played season-long fantasy, you'd be talking about Julio Jones getting you a touchdown to win your championship. But moving on to the Raiders and the Bengals, and this game is about the same level as that. I think that Bengals are -3 without Andy Dalton, without AJ Green. That's Raiders coming off their upset win of the Steelers. You have to wonder about that. That line, I don't know. That game that's probably appropriately lined. It's kind of on the high side. I feel like that's going to be like a 27-24 type of game maybe, or a 24-20 type of game. But there's just so many replacement level players there. I don't really want to touch it. So,
yeah, that's a good point. Once again, the Bungles have not exactly fulfilled their early season potential either, and the rebuild is in full swing with the Raiders. So they could come out and put a few points on the board, but doesn't feel right counting on it.
Yeah, and Hugh Jackson is the defensive coordinator. He got fired by the Browns, and now he's on the Bengals as an assistant coach. So there you go. Moving on to the Cowboys at the Colts, a very important game for both teams. The Colts need this for their wild card hopes. Cowboys, of course, would like to keep their advantage in the NFC East. And Colts -3, 47.5. The Colts games usually end up pretty high scoring. You've got two teams that are going to play in, perfect indoor conditions. Andrew Luck has been, if you look at his stats, they're almost as good as Patrick Mahomes. He's had a very underrated season because the team has not been very good. They've been, they missed their running back for a few games, and their defense has not been very strong. But the team can put up points, but they also give up points. So, you lean over there. The Cowboys are rolling right now, but, you see if the Amari Cooper show continues for another week. We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, I got to think that 6-0 dud from a couple of weeks ago was just an aberration for the Colts. They're definitely capable of putting up points on a more consistent basis. And, of course, how about them Cowboys?
Yeah. So, the Dolphins at the Vikings. Dolphins are alive for another, for the playoffs as well as the Vikings. Vikings 7.5-point favorites. Boy, you got to wonder about that line.
That definitely jumped out at me.
And 44.5. I kind of feel like that might go over. We'll see. Tannehill, though, he had that game. They always play well against the Patriots at home, and then he'll go and have a dud. He's just been that way his whole career. He'll have a couple of really good games and then just throw up a dud. And I feel like this could be the one. But the Vikings fired their offensive coordinator after last week, so they have a new coach to do the play calling. So we'll see what happens with that passing attack. Skins at Jaguars. Even the Skins, even though they're alive for a playoff spot, you got to wonder. They got Josh Johnson as their quarterback, and they benched the Sanchez. And the Jaguars always play well at home, so the total's only 36. Cody Kessler against Josh Johnson, I am going to pass.
Good move.
Seahawks at 49ers. This game intrigues me, actually. Seahawks are playing great. 49ers can put points on the board even though they're playing with a third-string quarterback. And they're getting 3.5 at home, and the total is 44. I really like the over here. I feel like the Seahawks, again, they're in a perilous spot for a wild card. So they can't afford to lose. It's not do or die for them, but you have to feel like against extending the game, et cetera, you like the over 44 here. So that'll be a good late game to watch. And, of course, the Patriots at the Steelers, and everybody in Steeler Nation's really upset after their loss last week, and they feel like the team is not in a good place emotionally, cohesively, coaching-wise. They're getting rumblings.
Their feelings were hurt.
Their feelings were hurt, but they're 2.5-point dogs at home. Come on. That screams to me take the Steelers. I don't know about you, but the total, we'll see. The Patriots, they had trouble keeping the Patriots have given up a fair amount of points this season. So I feel like 52 is doable here. I don't like to play overs that high, but I like Steelers plus 2.5 at plus 3. I feel like that should be on the list.
Yeah, they certainly the Steelers would earn the benefit of the doubt in that circumstance, I think. A game like that, even in the playoffs, they tend to had shootouts. So, I think those are doable positions.
So this game Sunday, Eagles at Rams, minus 11.5. Wow! After the Rams threw up that stinker last week, and then 52.5. I like the Eagles plus the points here. It's a cover play for me, but the Eagles are still alive for a playoff spot. And Big Dick Nick Foles is going to be back at the helm, I believe. Mysteriously, Carson Wentz has a back injury that needs time to heal, and he will not be available to start. So it'd be interesting to see what happens if that changes things. But, boy, almost 12 points for the Eagles, a team that has to have this game. You got to think they're going to keep it that close, right? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. They're certainly up against it. So, BDN, go for it.
And then the Philly special. They're going to just run that one play all day. So, the last game on Monday night is the Saints and the Panthers, and the Panthers are 6-point underdogs, but that's a game where the Saints have really they only have incentive to get the number one seed. They don't have they have a bye, they have a playoff spot locked up, they have the division title. You wonder where the motivation is in that game, and I think I'm going to stay away from that one. So. Should be an interesting week, though. Is there any one particular game? I could put that back up. Is there any one particular game that you feel like would be the one worth watching the most?
Just from a desperation point of view, Eagles at Rams, and the Panthers are just one of those teams that is very hard to figure out as well. So it's always fun to watch that Saints offense. If everything breaks down as it has so far this year, seeing those offensive juggernauts fight it out in the NFC would certainly be a lot of fun. I would love to see a Rams-Chiefs rematch.
Oh yeah,
Super Bowl. If they can maintain where they're at, I think that just from a playoff perspective, getting them in the right rhythm would be something to root for. But Breezy is always somebody who should be relied on to put up a bunch of points as well.
Yep.
And they're even though they're given almost 7, it just seems like they can really pull away from teams. So.
Okay, and Christian McCaffrey has been lights out as a fantasy player the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
He's very exciting to watch. He didn't the first year he played. It seemed like Cam Newton vultured him every week, and he wouldn't get the touchdowns. But now he's getting them. I think Cam's tired of getting hit. So let's wrap this up, and I'm going to throw up my picks for the week. And here we go. On Friday night, I am taking the Capitals minus 1.5 goals at plus 200. I just feel like that team is humming right now. Nick Backstrom, who's on the second line, is in near the top, if not the top, in points. Just dishing out assists left and right, and their goaltending is very good. And then on Saturday, I'm going to take both games. I'm going to take the Texans and the Jets over 41.5 at minus 110. And the later game against the Jets, I'm going to take the Broncos minus 2.5 at minus 107. And then on Sunday, I'm going to take the Steelers against the Cheatriots. And at plus 109, if I can get that at plus 3 at plus 100, I think I might do that. But I'm for the purpose of the show and the record keeping, that's going to be my play right there. And the Eagles plus 11.5 minus 115. I feel like all those plays are really solid, and hopefully I'll have a better week than last week. My bankroll started at 750, and I got to get it back up there in time for college basketball, hopefully. So we'll see what happens. Brian, is there any particular game that you feel like you want to make a pick on? Do you want me to put up anything in particular?
Yeah, I think that number with the Dolphins and Vikings is too much to ignore, so I'll go ahead and take the fish 7.5.
You're going to take the Dolphins plus 7.5. Okay, very good. You heard it here first. And before we go, I just want to remind everybody that you can call our show if you want to leave questions, comments, feedback, rage at a cloud. Call us at 1-8. Oh, sorry, that's wrong. Let me take that. Let me take that down. It's 1-866. It's 1-866 315 Finger Lakes 1 extension 810, and you can leave a message for us. And remember that we may play it back on the show. So check it out and leave us some feedback. And we hope to hear from you. And Brian, I just want to say, thanks for joining us today, and I'm glad we were able to work out a temporary audio-video solution, and maybe it'll be smoother next week, but glad to have you aboard, and we'll see how the games go this weekend.
Yes, absolutely. Wouldn't be a video podcast without audio issues, so thank you for your
All
patience. Right. Also, thank you for having me, Scoob. I'm glad to fill that pale, fat guy hole that you had in your show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do right now is play the outro music, and let's get some winners this week, everybody. Take care.